And when Kathleen saw the width and breadth of her domain, she wept. For there were no more franchises left to conquer.
They are who we thought they were.
The time has finally come. After years of anticipation, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny has finally arrived. And yes, folks, this film's bad. Really bad. In fact, it might be the worst thing that Disney has produced in its entire history as a studio. Okay, well, maybe that's a bit of an overstatement. Not the worst thing in its history, just the worst thing Disney's done since The Last Jedi.
They fly now! They fly now! They fly now!
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Rey Skywalker.
That's not how the Force works.
I bypassed the compressor.
All right, not the worst thing in its history then. Maybe just the worst thing since Captain Marvel.
Is that like a personal attack or something?
Okay, fine. Let's just say the worst thing post-pandemic. Okay, just the worst thing over the last 2 years. 1 year. 9 months. 6 months.
Surprised to see me?
3 months? 1 month? In the last week? Oh, Disney sucks. I mean, it's almost incredible how thoroughly Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm have managed to ruin all their lucrative franchises. I mean, who comes up with all this crap? Never mind. We all know. This will have spoilers, so you've been warned. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny actually has a promising start. We find Indy in the hands of the bad Germans. World War II is ending, and the bad Germans are packing up a bunch of valuable relics on a train as they flee the approaching Allies. Indy and his friend Basil are there trying to recover the Spear of Longinus. However, a bad German named Voller is there, and he has the Antikythera, an ancient mechanism created by Archimedes, an ancient Greek mathematician and inventor, or at least he has half of it. The other half is lost to history. Voller is convinced that the Antikythera, or the Archimedes dial, as it's also known, has the power to change Germany's fortunes in the war. But the other Germans don't believe him. A chase ensues as they escape on a train, and Indy tries to retrieve the spear, which turns out to be a fake, but he and Basil discover the dial, and they wind up escaping with it. This opening sequence is pretty good, actually, and it feels like an Indiana Jones film. The CGI to recreate a young Harrison Ford is pretty good for the most part, but I still found it a bit jarring when I heard 78-year-old Harrison Ford's gravelly voice coming out of young Indiana Jones's mouth. Anyway, we jump to 1969, and surprise, surprise, Indy's old, washed up, and he's pretty much given up on life. Gee, who does this remind me of? We learn that Marion is divorcing him, and he's retiring from a teaching job, and then he's visited by his goddaughter, Helena. Basil's daughter, who is played by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, aka Fleabag. Her father was obsessed with the dial, and she claims she wants to use the half of the dial that Indy has to find the other half. Now, Indy shows it to her, but then some goons show up to take it. They work for Voller, who's now working for the US government. Now, he still wants the dial, and the CIA is helping him, but Helena manages to escape with the dial. He meets up with Sala, who's living in New York now, conveniently, and driving a taxi. Now, Sala has learned that an auction of rare antiquities will be taking place at a hotel in Morocco, so Indy hops a plane and he flies there. At the auction, Indy confronts Helena, who's trying to sell the dial, and Voller and his boys then show up as well. They take the dial and drive off, and Indy, Helena, and her sidekick, a young Moroccan boy named Freddie, chase after them in these little three-wheeled buggies of some kind. A lengthy chase ensues, a bit too lengthy, really. That's one of the problems this movie has. The action sequences seem to go on a bit too long for the most part. This movie could have easily been cut down by about, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. So Voller and his men get away, but the dial is useless without the other half of it. Now, supposedly, Archimedes wrote a tablet that revealed the location of the other half of the dial, and Helena tells Indy that her father had learned that the shipwreck where the dial was originally found was only half of the ship. The other part had slid down a cliff to a lower depth in the ocean and has never been explored. So they hop a plane to Greece and they get the help of a sea diver named Ronaldo, who's played by Antonio Banderas. They find the wreck and they retrieve the tablet, but Voller and his men show up again and they capture Indy, Helena, and Freddy. Ronaldo and his crew are all killed by Voller and his men, and then they force Indy and Helena to translate the tablet and reveal the location of the other half of the dial. But then Indy, Helena, and Freddy manage to escape, leaving Voller's group behind. They travel to Sicily, to the city of Syracuse, where Archimedes had once lived, and they look for his tomb in a series of caves. Now, they find the tomb, and they find the other half of the dial, but Voller and his men show up again and take the other half of the dial. A firefight ensues, and during this, Indy is shot in the chest. Then Voller tells his men to take Indy with them. Why exactly? Who knows? And they go to a nearby airport while Helena and Freddy follow them. Now, the Antikythera is believed to be an orrery, a device that ancient cultures used to predict the movements of the moon and the planets. But Basil believed that the dial could predict the occurrence of fissures in time, and one can use these fissures in time to travel into the past.
What?
Voller reveals that he plans to use the dial to travel back in time to 1939 and prevent the mistakes that Hitler committed, which cost Germany the war. There's an old German bomber plane from the war that's waiting for them, which they board and they take off in. Now, Helena manages to board the plane as it's taking off. Meanwhile, Freddy hotwires a nearby plane and takes off following the Germans. Now, how can Freddy, a poor adolescent boy from the streets of Morocco, successfully fly a plane on his first attempt? Who knows? But he can. Not only does he not have any trouble flying, but he's able to take off and fly in the midst of a violent thunderstorm with high winds, heavy rains, and almost zero visibility. So they find the fissure in time, and then they fly through it with Freddy following them, and they arrive in ancient Greece during the Roman siege of Syracuse. The bomber is damaged, and Indy and Helena bail out and parachute down, and the plane crashes, and Voller and the bad guys all die. They meet Archimedes, and they realize that the dial will only let you travel back to that particular place in time or go back to the present. So Indy, who's shot in the chest, remember, decides that he wants to stay there in the past and just die, telling Helena that there's nothing back in the present for him and to just leave him there. They get into an argument about it, and then Helena knocks Indy out, and he wakes up back in the present. And then Marion shows up, and they're reunited, and then the film just sort of ends there. Wow. Just wow. What a mess this movie is. I mean, where do I even begin with this movie? First of all, the writing in this movie is just a mess. You can kind of see the movie that they originally made before all the reshoots. The result is a movie that's got a very disjointed tone, and the character's behavior is oddly inconsistent, especially Helena. Her attitude towards Indy varies wildly through the film. Sometimes she's outright hostile, then in some scenes she's is kind of dismissive towards him. Voller is an underwhelming villain to say the least. Mads Mikkelsen is a good actor, but sometimes even a good actor needs something to work with, and the script just doesn't give him much. Indy himself is also a bit inconsistent. Sometimes he seems like his old self. He's brave and determined, but then sometimes he seems demoralized and unmotivated and almost even cowardly. One thing that stands out is how he behaves after he's shot at the end of the second act. He seems gravely injured and offers no resistance when Voller's men bring him with him to the plane. Now, on the plane, he just kind of lays on his seat and seems to be slowly slipping away. He's weak and seems to be on the verge of dying. But then, after they go through the portal into the past, suddenly he's alert and aware again. He's sitting up, moving around, and doesn't seem to be in pain anymore, really. And after they get to the past and the plane is damaged, Indy saves Helena from a German and then dons a parachute and they jump together to escape. On the ground, Indy has a conversation with Archimedes and again seems not to be in any pain despite a severe chest wound and bleeding for at least, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes at this point. Originally, I think Helena was going to save Indy in the plane rather than the other way around, which is why Indy's condition abruptly improves after they go through the portal. Another thing is that you can see how the writers kept writing themselves into difficult spots, and then they had to conjure up some way to get out of it. They have Indy and Elena survive the bomber crashing, but then how are they going to get back to the present without a plane? So they have Freddy hotwire a plane and then fly after them, even though he's a kid and he has zero clue how to fly a plane. And the ending with Marion feels very tacked on. She just kind of shows up out of nowhere and she and Indy reconcile, and then the movie just sort of ends. So, I mean, where does Lucasfilm go from here? They've wrecked all their valuable franchises. I'm sure Kathleen Kennedy would love to ruin Howard the Duck too, but he's back at Marvel now. I suppose we should just brace ourselves for that gritty reboot of Tucker. Only this time Tucker will be a strong, empowered black lesbian. Anyway, I'll give Indy and the Dial of Destiny 2 fedoras out of 5, I guess. Let me know what you thought of Indy 5, and please like this video before you leave. Also, please sub to the channel and check out some of my other videos. And I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.